When hope became a weapon, Dr. Kale pressed his webbed hands against the observation dome as another chunk of their moon crashed into the ocean below. The impact sent massive waves racing across the surface of Theros, swallowing entire districts of their floating cities. His gills fluttered with stress as he watched thousands of his people scramble to higher platforms, their silver scales gleaming in the light of their dying moon. The calculations were wrong, he whispered to himself, his voice carrying the weight of an entire civilization's fate. The moon that had orbited Theros for millions of years was breaking apart faster than anyone had predicted. What should have been a gradual process over decades was happening in months. Elder Mira swam up beside him, her ancient form still graceful despite her age. "How long do we have?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer would not be good. 6 weeks, Kale replied, his voice barely audible above the sound of rushing water around their research station. "Maybe 8 if we're lucky. The gravitational stress is increasing exponentially. Each impact makes the next one worse." The Vetheri had evolved in the deep oceans of Theros, building their civilization in harmony with the tides and currents. Their cities floated on the surface and extended deep underwater, connected by streams of bioluminescent organisms that carried both light and information throughout their world. They were masters of biotechnology, capable of growing their buildings and tools from living coral and modified sea plants. But for all their advancement, they had never developed space travel. Their culture valued patience, harmony, and gradual progress. The concept of leaving their world had never occurred to them until it became a matter of survival. "The evacuation fleet won't be ready in time," Elder Mira said, stating what they both knew. The Vetheri had spent the last months converting their largest vessels into generation ships, but they moved too slowly and carried too few people. Even if they launched tomorrow, they could only save a fraction of their population. Cal's tentacles curled with determination. "Then we need help from outside." The ancient communication array had been built by their ancestors as a way to listen to the cosmos, searching for signs of other intelligent life. It had remained silent for centuries, receiving only the background noise of space. But Cal had modified it, boosting its power with biotechnology that could amplify their signal across vast distances. "The first signal project," he said, turning to face the gathered scientists. "We send everything. Our language, our culture, our location, our situation. We show them who we are and ask for their help." Dr. Naya, the youngest of their group, pulsed with nervous bioluminescence. "But what if they're hostile? What if they see us as weak and decide to take advantage?" "Then we die with dignity," Kel replied. "But if we do nothing, we die anyway. At least this way, we have hope." The message they crafted was beautiful in its simplicity and desperation. It began with mathematical concepts that any spacefaring civilization would understand, then moved into artistic representations of their culture. They included detailed biological scans of their species, showing their peaceful nature and their complete lack of aggressive capabilities. The signal contained star charts marking their location, population estimates, and most importantly, a timeline showing how long they had before their world became uninhabitable. They offered their knowledge of biotechnology, their art, their music, and their philosophy to anyone willing to help them survive. It was a message of pure hope, transmitted on frequencies that would carry across the galaxy. 47 light-years away, on a small monitoring station hidden behind Earth's moon, the signal arrived with enough power to wake up every sensor array in the solar system. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison had been manning the Deep Space Communications Array for 3 years, and he had never seen anything like it. The signal was clearly artificial, clearly intelligent, and clearly from very far away. His hands trembled as he initiated the first contact protocols, sending the data stream to Earth's most advanced translation computers. This was the moment humanity had been preparing for since they first looked up at the stars. But the translation systems had been designed by Earth's military intelligence agencies, programmed to look for threats and strategic information. When they analyzed the Vetheri signal, they interpreted it through the lens of human warfare and conquest. The mathematical sequences looked like tactical formations. The biological scans appeared to be intelligence reports about human physiology, showing how to exploit their weaknesses. The star charts were interpreted as invasion routes, and the timeline wasn't seen as a countdown to extinction, but as a schedule for attack. Most damaging of all, the Vetheri's offer to share their biotechnology was translated as a threat to unleash biological weapons. Within 6 hours, the translated signal was on the desk of Admiral Sarah Chen, the highest-ranking officer in Earth's Space Defense Command. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, but she had always hoped first contact would be peaceful. The report she read described an advanced alien civilization that had conquered their own star system and was now setting their sights on Earth. According to the translation, they possessed biological weapons capable of destroying all human life, and they were giving humanity one final chance to surrender before they launched their invasion. Admiral Chen was a veteran of 3 colonial conflicts and had risen through the ranks by making hard decisions under pressure. She was known for her tactical brilliance and her absolute dedication to protecting human lives. The alien threat analysis left her with only one conclusion. "They're not asking for our surrender," she told her staff during the emergency briefing. "They're telling us we're going to surrender. They've already decided our fate." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Earth's most advanced enemy had always been other humans. Now they faced something potentially far more dangerous. "What are our defensive capabilities against biological weapons?" asked General Martinez, the head of Earth's ground forces. "Limited," admitted Dr. Sarah Kim, the chief of biological warfare defense. "If they have technology advanced enough for interstellar travel, they could potentially engineer pathogens we've never seen before." Admiral Chen stood up, her decision already made. "Then we don't give them the chance to use them. We take the fight to their home system." The mobilization began immediately. Earth's entire space fleet, built over decades of expansion into the solar system, was recalled and prepared for humanity's first interstellar war. The Terra-class battleships, each one capable of glassing an entire planet, were loaded with humanity's most advanced weapons. Admiral Chen personally oversaw the preparation of her flagship, the Retribution, a massive dreadnought that represented the pinnacle of human military engineering. Its armor could withstand direct hits from nuclear weapons, and its main guns could punch holes through asteroids. But the jewel of the human fleet was the Prometheus, an experimental vessel equipped with humanity's newest weapon, quantum disruptors that could tear apart matter at the molecular level. It was a weapon so powerful that its very existence was classified at the highest levels. As the fleet prepared to depart, Chen couldn't shake a nagging feeling that something was wrong with the intelligence they had received. The alien signal had been powerful, but it hadn't seemed aggressive in its transmission patterns. Still, she had learned to trust the analysis systems, and they were unanimous in their assessment of the threat. "Ma'am," reported Captain Davies, her intelligence officer, "we've received additional signals from the same source. They appear to be sending more detailed information about their biological capabilities." What Chen didn't know was that the Vetheri had sent follow-up messages describing their medical technology and their techniques for healing wounded sea life. The translation computers interpreted these as more detailed biological weapon specifications. "They're not even trying to hide their intentions," Chen said grimly. "Launch the fleet." 47 ships departed Earth orbit in the largest military operation in human history. They carried enough firepower to destroy an entire solar system, and they were heading toward what they believed was the greatest threat humanity had ever faced. Back on Theros, Dr. Kale waited hopefully for a response to their signal. Another massive wave crashed over their research station as more debris from their dying moon struck the ocean. Thousands more of his people had died in the latest impacts, and their evacuation efforts were falling further behind. "Any response yet?" asked Elder Mira, though hope was fading from her voice. "Nothing," Kale replied. adjusting the receivers for the 100th time that day. But the signal only reached the nearest systems yesterday. If anyone received it, they would need time to prepare a response. He didn't know that his message of peace and desperation had been interpreted as a declaration of war. He didn't know that instead of rescue ships, a human war fleet was racing toward them at faster, light speeds. The greatest tragedy in galactic history was about to unfold, born from good intentions on both sides and the fatal flaw of misunderstanding. When warriors met the innocent, the human war fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Theros system, like avenging angels emerging from the void. 47 ships arranged themselves in perfect battle formation, their weapons hot and shields raised to maximum power. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Retribution, expecting to see a powerful alien armada waiting to challenge them. Instead, her tactical screens showed chaos. "Report," Chen ordered, her voice steady despite her confusion. "Ma'am," replied Lieutenant Commander Torres at the sensor station, his voice uncertain, "I'm not detecting any military formations. What I'm seeing is civilian evacuation operations." The main display filled with images from throughout the system. Thousands of vessels filled the space around the dying world, but they weren't warships. They were converted cargo haulers, passenger transports, and what appeared to be entire floating cities being slowly moved away from their home planet. "Those aren't invasion fleets," whispered Captain Davies, studying the tactical analysis. "They're refugee convoys." Admiral Chen felt the first stirring of doubt. The alien vessels showed no aggressive positioning. They weren't arranged for battle or defense. Instead, they appeared to be fleeing in organized groups toward the outer planets, many of them clearly overloaded with passengers and supplies. "Ma'am," reported the science officer, "I'm detecting massive gravitational instabilities in the system. The planet's moon is breaking apart. The debris impacts are causing catastrophic damage to the surface." Captain Rodriguez, commanding the Advanced Destroyer Squadron, moved his ships closer for a better look. What he saw through his viewports changed everything he thought he understood about their mission. The alien homeworld was dying. Its blue oceans were being hammered by massive chunks of lunar debris, creating waves that towered hundreds of meters high. The planet's surface was covered with what looked like abandoned floating cities, their lights flickering as power systems failed under the constant battering. "Admiral," Rodriguez reported over the communications channel, "the planet is being evacuated. This isn't a military operation. These people are running for their lives." But Admiral Chen had her orders and 40 years of military training. She had seen deception before, had fought enemies who used civilian shields to hide their true intentions. The intelligence reports were clear about the alien threat, and she couldn't ignore the possibility that this apparent evacuation was an elaborate ruse. "Maintain defensive positions," she ordered. "Continue scanning for military assets." Dr. Kale felt the tremor run through the water around him as the latest impact sent shockwaves across the planet. His research station was one of the few still operational, powered by bioluminescent organisms that had somehow adapted to the chaos. Through his sensors, he detected something that made his heart race with hope. "Elder Mira," he called out, his voice carrying excitement for the first time in weeks. "Ships. Unknown vessels at the edge of the system." The old Vetheri swam over quickly, her failing eyesight compensated by enhanced biological sensors. "How many?" "Dozens of them," Kale replied, his tentacles dancing with joy. "They received our signal. They came to help us." Without hesitation, Kale activated the communication array and sent a greeting message toward the unknown fleet. The signal was filled with gratitude and relief, showing images of their dying world and their desperate evacuation efforts. He included detailed scans of their evacuation ships, hoping the newcomers could help coordinate the rescue operations. Aboard the Retribution, the alien response signal triggered every threat detection system on the ship. The translation computers, still operating under their flawed programming, interpreted the Vetheri's grateful message as tactical intelligence about human fleet positions and a request for the humans to lower their defenses. "They're trying to get us to drop our shields," reported the communications officer. "The signal contains detailed scans of our fleet formation." Admiral Chen's jaw tightened. The aliens were even more devious than she had thought. Not only were they using their own civilians as shields, but they were actively trying to gather intelligence about human defenses. "All ships, maintain maximum alert status," she ordered. "Prepare to engage hostile forces." The misunderstanding reached its breaking point when a group of Vetheri evacuation ships, overloaded with refugees, began moving toward the human fleet. Dr. Kell had directed them to approach the newcomers, believing they were rescue vessels sent in response to their plea for help. To Admiral Chen, it looked like an attack formation. The alien ships were approaching despite her warnings, and their unusual biological technology was interfering with human sensors in ways that looked suspiciously like jamming attempts. "Ma'am," reported the tactical officer, "multiple alien vessels are approaching our position. They're not responding to our hail frequencies, and they appear to be using some kind of sensor disruption technology." Chen watched as the alien ships continued their approach. They were moving slowly, but their sheer numbers could overwhelm even her powerful fleet if they got too close. Everything in her training told her to act before the situation became hopeless. "All ships," she said, her voice carrying the weight of command across 47 vessels, "you are authorized to engage. Protect yourselves and complete the mission." The first shots of the war were fired by the destroyer Vigilant, its plasma cannons reaching out across space to strike the lead Vetheri transport. The ship, packed with 3,000 refugees including children and elderly Vetheri, simply disintegrated under the impact. Dr. Kale watched in horror as the rescue ships he had been praying for opened fire on his people. The transport ship Gentle Current, carrying refugees from the coastal cities, vanished in a ball of superheated plasma. There was no time to understand why the newcomers were attacking. Only time to react. "All ships," he broadcast on the emergency frequency, "we are under attack. Defend the evacuation fleet." The Vetheri had no warships, but their evacuation vessels were equipped with biotechnology that could be adapted for defense. Living coral formations grew rapidly across their hulls, creating organic armor that could absorb energy weapons. Biological sensors extended like tentacles from their ships, trying to understand their attackers. To the human fleet, it looked like the aliens were deploying some kind of advanced armor system and extending weapons arrays. The strange organic technology was unlike anything in human experience, and it seemed to be adapting to their attacks in real time. "They're using some kind of adaptive technology," reported the science officer aboard the Retribution. "Their ships are modifying themselves to resist our weapons." The battle escalated quickly. Human quantum disruptors tore through Vetheri evacuation ships, while biological projectiles launched by desperate refugee vessels struck human hulls, eating through armor with organic acids never intended for warfare. Both sides fought with growing desperation and confusion. The humans believed they were facing a deceptive enemy using civilian shields and adaptive technology. The Vetheri thought they were under attack by ruthless invaders who were slaughtering refugees. Admiral Chen watched the tactical display with growing unease. The alien resistance was fierce but disorganized, and their ships were clearly not designed for combat. More troubling was the complete absence of the military installations and bioweapon facilities that intelligence had predicted. "Ma'am," reported Captain Rodriguez from his forward position, "I'm getting strange readings from the alien vessels. They're not military ships. These appear to be converted civilian transports, and they're packed with what look like families." The revelation hit Chen like a physical blow. She ordered an immediate ceasefire, but the battle had taken on a life of its own. Ships on both sides were damaged and desperate, firing on anything that moved. It was Dr. Kale who finally broke through the chaos, working frantically with the communication array, while explosions lit up the space around him. He managed to bypass the translation programs that had caused so much death. Using simple mathematical concepts and universal symbols, he transmitted a desperate message directly to Admiral Chen's ship. The message was heartbreaking in its simplicity. It showed the Vetheri as they truly were, peaceful aquatic beings whose world was dying. It showed their children, their art, their desperate attempts to save themselves from a natural disaster. Most importantly, it showed the true meaning of their original signal, not a declaration of war, but a plea for help. Admiral Chen stood in stunned silence as the real message played on her screens. The aliens hadn't been threatening humanity. They had been asking for help, and humanity had responded with overwhelming violence. "Ceasefire," she broadcast to all ships. "All vessels, ceasefire immediately." But the damage was already done. 12 Vetheri evacuation ships had been destroyed, taking nearly 30,000 refugees with them. 3 human ships had suffered damage from desperate counterattacks, though their superior technology had protected them from serious casualties. In the horrible silence that followed the end of the battle, both species finally understood what had happened. A translation error, born from humanity's military paranoia and the Vetheri's unfamiliar communication methods, had turned a rescue mission into a massacre. Dr. Kale's voice came across the communication channels, transmitted in broken but understandable human language that he had somehow learned from intercepted Earth broadcasts. "Please," he said, his words heavy with grief and desperate hope. "We only wanted help. Our world is dying. Our children are dying. Please." Admiral Chen made the hardest decision of her career. Setting aside 40 years of military protocol, she opened a direct channel to the Vetheri scientist. "Dr. Kale," she said, and somehow she knew his name from the data patterns in his signals. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Terra Defense Fleet. We made a terrible mistake. Tell me how we can help." What followed was the largest rescue operation in galactic history. Human ships, designed for war, were hastily converted to carry refugees. The quantum disruptors that had torn through Vetheri ships were reconfigured to break apart the dangerous lunar debris threatening the planet. Human medical technology worked alongside Vetheri biotechnology to save as many lives as possible. But the tragedy of first contact could never be fully undone. Trust, once broken, would take generations to rebuild. The 30,000 Vetheri who died in the battle became martyrs to both species, a reminder of what could happen when fear overcome wisdom. Dr. Kale and Admiral Chen worked side by side during the evacuation, 2 beings from different worlds united by their shared determination to save lives. As the last transport ships carried the Vetheri survivors to safety among the moons of the outer planets, they stood together watching Theros tear itself apart in its final death throes. "Your people will be safe," Chen said, though she knew the words could never heal the wounds they had inflicted. "And your people will be remembered as both destroyers and saviors," Kale replied. "Perhaps that is what makes you human. The capacity for both great violence and great mercy." The human fleet departed the Theros system carrying more than just refugees. They carried the weight of a lesson that would reshape humanity's approach to the cosmos. When they had expected war, they had found desperation. When they had prepared for conquest, they had discovered the need for compassion. And in the depths of space, the Vetheri survivors began building new homes on the worlds humanity helped them find, their children growing up with stories of the day the stars brought both death and salvation. The galaxy was vast and full of other species waiting to be discovered. But the lesson of Theros would echo through human history. Sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when not to fight. And the greatest victory is helping those who cannot help themselves. In the end, humanity had answered the call for peace with warships, but they had learned to answer the call for help with open hands.